Hi, I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you're listening to Wild Voice, the podcast where I take this voice of mine and share my wild journey with you. Being widowed at 34 with a 15-month-old, most would see as life ending, and instead, I alchemized it and put life back together. Through my own healing, I realized who I am and what I'm here to do. I'm an intuitive energy healer and spiritual teacher, and sharing how I view the world is how I help you upgrade your life and alchemize your journey into magic. Okay, guys, so today's episode is an interview I did with Pat Barber. He's a part of the health and fitness industry, father of 4 boys, lives in Santa Cruz, California, but vacations in New Zealand, and that's where I caught him for our episode today. He created his Instagram account to share his fatherhood trials and tribulations. I know whether we're a parent, an aunt, uncle, grandparent, we know these trials and tribulations well. I came across him randomly on Instagram one night when I was doing the reel scroll, as we do, and I saw a video he posted in regards to a challenge he started with himself and his kids, the Yelling Challenge. I was intrigued, so I reached out to him, and here we are. I thought his approach was one worth sharing. This parenting journey, we're all out here trying all the things and doing our best. And although he's not here to tell you what to do or how to do it, you might find a few things that resonate with you. We talk parenting, how each kid might need a different style of parenting, values and relationships, and how to hold ourselves accountable on this life journey. Oh, and also enjoy the wonders of technology that you'll see give us a little visit multiple times throughout our chat. Soul fam, meet Pat. The way I found you is on Instagram, and I saw your reel come up, and I don't know if I'm wording it right on what you called it, but I think it was like a yelling challenge.
So the challenge that I did was essentially like the Father's Guild in general. That whole account is more of it's like a creative outlet for me. My main job is in health and fitness, and through that, there's a lot of, at least the way I was brought up in it, there's a lot of examining the process. Like, what are you doing? Like what? Because like we have an outcome that we're looking for, and then you go, okay, well, how do we get that outcome? And then you do something, and then you say, okay, did that get you the outcome? And they're like, no. And okay, we'll do something different, or like maybe it gave you the outcome, but could you do it better? Could you do it more efficiently? And that's a very organic process in my workspace and the things that I've done. So over the years, I've come to apply that to self, and I think that the systematic self-observation when it comes to growing as a human is a very important thing, right? And that's always going to be from a different perspective and lens based off of who you are and your upbringing and the environment you're currently in. For me, I tend to be creative and want to express some sort of creativity in my life at different times, and it came to a point where I'm 4 children deep. I'm by no means an expert on being a parent, but I have a lot of anecdotal evidence of 4 children and realizing how different they are, and I've struggled and I've thrived, and I kind of came to this place where like I really love being a father. Like it is hands down one of the best things I've ever done, if not the best thing I've ever done, but it's also the most challenging thing I've ever done. But I love parenthood, and I love this struggle of it, and I see so many fathers and parents just not enjoying it and not thriving. And so for me, I don't pretend to actually have the answer for anybody else, because we're all very different, but I do have some answers for myself and things that I've tried, and I wanted to have an honest forum to kind of put stuff out there on. And so I started the Father's Guild, which was my just like creative outlet of my thoughts on my journey through fatherhood, and more of like a public journal than anything else. And I struggle with social media. I hate it. I hate so much of what is posted on there, and I don't like even looking at it. And then it's just a vapid, hollow place for 99% of it. And I found myself reflecting and being like, I could either keep complaining about what's on there, or I could put out stuff I believe in. So I decided to do the latter, which was put out stuff I believe in. And that's got its own bag of issues. But I started putting content out on the Father's Guild, and it was just my thoughts on being a dad. And one of the posts that you saw went quite viral. And what had happened was I had a conversation with my wife, and we communicate really well, and taking stuff on board is not too difficult for me. And I'm always trying to be better. So anyone who can give me feedback, like I want to listen to it. And so I was talking to my wife and we were having a conversation about how when certain things happen, my children had each independently talked to her about being very frightened when I yell, which I understandable. Like I have a very intense yell, and most often I'm calm and mellow and loving and all these other things. So when I go to yell, it's extra extreme. And there are times that I do yell intentionally and think a yell is actually a necessary thing, when it comes to safety, or actually mainly safety. And then there's some nuance there when it comes to certain kids needing a little bit more force than others, but that's my own personal belief structure on that. But what had happened was my wife expressed that to me, and I was like, well, that's interesting that all three of them said that independently. I was doing some film work for something else I was doing. She had told me that earlier that day. So I was like, I wonder what would happen if I interviewed the boys and asked them what their least favorite thing about me was, And so I did, and I sent two of them out of the room, and I only brought them in one at a time. And I don't film them often, like in an interview setting. It's not my go-to. So they were all like fidgeting and had their little mic on, and they're like, this is cool. And they're playing with it. And I asked them, finish the sentence. My least favorite thing about my dad is something along those lines with that question. And each one of them independently said, yelling at me, screaming at me. My oldest son said farting. And I was like, okay, well, what if you could, like, what else? And he goes, yelling at me. And I was like, if you could have me stop one of those things, which would it be? And he said, the yelling at me. So it was just a conversation around that with my boys. And then that inspired me to, like, I know that I thrive during challenges. Like, if you challenge me to do something, I'm much more likely to succeed at it than if I'm like, let me just do it for doing its sake. Like, I don't. Yeah. I can very easily talk myself out of like, I should do it, whatever,
Sure.
And I've known that through my own self-exploration. So I challenged myself. I was like, I'm going to challenge myself to not yell for a full month. And every time I yell, I'm going to give my kids $5, and not so much as a reward for me yelling, but as like a signaling to myself of like, there's something else associated with me just responding via yelling that I'm going to lose money. And so and it's not, I care about losing $5. It's more, it was going to give me a mental, like a separate thing to think about to give me space. And so that was what I did, is I put that video.
Oh, can you hear me? I think I lost you for a sec. We're texting back and forth right now, just telling him that sometimes the universe decides when we are going to get practice at certain things like problem solving. And then I just saw him pop up, but I might have been so excited. I don't know if I hit cancel because now he's not here. I think I clicked admit. Now I can't remember. Gosh, between the two of us. Well, I'm going to get practice at editing this podcast episode, since now that's something I'm starting to do. Again, the universe giving me now an opportunity to practice my editing skills. What a full circle freaking moment. There we go. I see you.
Let's see here.
Oh, I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Uh-huh.
Oh my, is it actually working?
Yeah, for right now, we'll just take it.
We'll take it. But I actually hit record on my camera over here.
Oh, did you?
So I have the audio if you need to layer in an audio track. I don't know if you edit these podcasts or whatever, but I have all the audio right here too.
Perfect. Well, that's perfect. Two of us have it. I know. I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, you're getting practice at problem solving. I'm going to get practice at editing, because I've just recently taken that on as a new thing to learn about, so I can do it. So we both got practice today.
We both got practice. I was midway through the story. How far did you hear? I think I was just saying
you pretty
much put this out there on social media.
Yeah. And you had said you interviewed the boys and they all had said the same thing for the most part. And then that's kind of when we were getting into what you were going to do with that information.
Got it. Okay. So I put that out there on the social medias as like just challenge for myself, as I was like, okay, with this information, I'm going to use it as a way of challenging myself, because I know that I work better via a challenge than if I just say, hey, I'm going to do this. So I was like, I'm going to put it out there as a challenge for myself. And I invited anyone who wanted to challenge themselves to jump on board.
Can I ask you a question about that real quick? And I was thinking about it earlier. Do you think you would have had the same drive to do it or to kind of go this route if, let's say, your wife came to you and was like, hey, I've been hearing this from the boys. I think it would be great if you yelled at them less, or however that would have gone? Do you feel like it was something you kind of had to come up? She kind of had to give you that space to be like, I'm going to hand you this information and then I'm going to allow you to do what you want to do with it. Do you find that that was more helpful in your process and how you operate?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I'm a big firm believer of, you can't make anyone do anything.
Right.
Being in the health industry, I wish that was the case, but it's not. They kind of have to come to that conclusion on their own. In essence, we've had similar conversations many times.
Mm-hmm.
But if my wife ever came to me and was like, I really want you to do this, I would just say yes. In our relationship is just like a very easy thing for me to do. Like if she ever expressed a strong need for something and was like, I really need this to happen, I would be like, absolutely, how can I make that happen? So I personally probably would have just taken it on board and been like, absolutely, yeah, let's do it. But we've had a similar conversation. She's never asked anything of me, but she's expressed, her sides of it. And this was just the time that I think many other things in my life were going, they're very busy and very overwhelming, but they're all going very good to where I had the headspace to be like, I want to do this. This is what I want to work on. I'm not working on X, Y, or Z. I would like to work on this. And so I did. But yeah, I hear what you're saying with giving the space for someone to find it for themselves. But I think in my particular scenario, I would have done it if she would have asked. But I do think giving people the space in a very organic way is really important. That being said, I almost disagree with that in terms of a romantic relationship, because it's like some of that, in my personal opinion, is like you owe it to the partner to be open to anything. And, within the context of reasonability, and also a conversation should be able to be had around it on both sides.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm very ready to do things differently to benefit the people around me. But that's also because I'm in a really privileged headspace of like, I understand that things could be better.
For sure. Well,
And
I
so
think
I constantly try to make that be the case.
Yeah, well, I think that lends itself to, I've heard you talk about in other videos that you have created a life where you have gotten to the point that you can take things on in this way, and where these conversations aren't things that necessarily become these arguments or disagreements or defensive moments, because you see them as something different. And that's because you've done this internal reflection and work. And I think that's part of what I think is so great when you can get to that point in a relationship and parenting, obviously, because that's even helps even more. It doesn't just happen overnight, right? So I think the fact that you're at a place in your relationship and your parenting together that you can take that and really respect what the other person is saying. That just means both of you have done this work to come together and on yourself. So, but I could see where some people might approach things a little differently. And so I think it's just a great kind of broad picture to see why people do the work, because you can get to this point where these things are a little more, I don't know if effortless is right, but they have like an ease to them.
Yeah, I think it's not at all effortless,
Right.
but the sentiment around it being like, it's not painful.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of people express when they're like, oh, I can't believe, you would have that conversation. I'm like, well, it's not a hard conversation for me to have, because we've had millions of little conversations, and we're very open. We're a big, as much as it's not a parenting book, I think Extreme Ownership, the book by Jocko Willing, is like, if you want to be an effective human, it's like, yeah, man, even if it's not your fault, just own your shit, and figure out ways to go through life where you can take responsibility for everything, but also not carry stuff. My wife and I we have a wonderful relationship, but there's definitely times where we fight.
Oh, for sure. I can only imagine, like with us all. And I find as the more enlightened, and I use that word just in like internal processing and like learning new things and seeing how the responsibility and how the world just tends to look a little different, but that can bring two people together, and you're kind of both dealing with your stuff at the same time. And that stuff can just can be a lot. To your point of, it's not effortless, but the pain point is a little different, because you feel like you're actually moving. You can tell that you're moving in a forward direction instead of this like spinning in circles, which sometimes feels very painful when you have those moments. Or I know in my past when I've had those moments in relationships, and I'm like, I know we're working on it, but it's not going. I can feel we're not like tapping into really what could be happening. And when we kind of do that internal work and you kind of see those pain points in a different way, you can just feel the forward motion.
Yeah. And I don't think that there's like a right way to do that. or
Right.
like a way that's going to work for everyone. I think everyone's going to have that journey in a very different way based off of their own pathology and history. For my wife, it's a very different process than it is for me. But I think
Yeah.
with us, well, I think with all things, like you kind of alluded to this of talking about examining what you're doing as a parent and being kind of in that middle zone is like for me, I think of it as just being intentional and
Hmm.
like am I doing these things on purpose or am I
Right.
just doing these things? And
Hmm.
I think then even if I am doing these things on purpose, am I looking at the outcome? Am I being like, is the outcome getting me to where I want it to be? Then I have to go, okay, well, where do I want to be? What do I want this to look like? And I think that not many people have worked it back far enough to be like, maybe it's getting me the instantaneous outcome, but it's
Yeah.
not getting me the long-term outcome that I would hope for. Maybe giving my kid an iPad at the dinner table shuts them up for now,
Mhm.
but it 100% not the long-term outcome that I want if I examine all the other factors on board with it. So
100%.
but it's like, it's one of those things where I don't think everyone can approach that process the same way of really examining it because they have their own lens to deal with, their own background to go through.
For sure.
And I'm just very fortunate that my wife and I, while being very different, we have the same underlying value structure.
Hmm.
And we have the same long-term outcome that we're going for. And
Hmm.
then it's just a matter of having those little works happen in different ways along the road.
Yeah, I think that's pretty amazing to articulate it that way. The values are really important because we could have how we get there could look different. And there's at some point
Totally.
we need to know, like, but are we working towards the same thing? Like, is what's important to me important to you? Because otherwise, no matter
Totally.
how much you care about each other, how much effort you put in, you're not going to get what you're hoping to create for the most part. It's going
Right.
to be this kind of uncomfortable dance. And when we did that, that was something that was a game changer. Even though I always knew that was important, I think it took certain things for me to be like, no, like literally, let's sit down and write down our values as a family. Like, what are your values as a
Right.
family? Values in a relationship, values in career. So that kind of separated us putting the other person in those spots. Like, what do I love that you do? Okay, that's a value. Well, no, like if I'm not here, regardless, like what is important to you? And it feels like it disconnects. Like, I think when I say it, it sounds like it disconnects, but it actually brings you closer because you're like, regardless of what I'm seeing, what is important to me? And that
Yeah.
helps me know because then I know actually what is
Right.
really important to you. If I take out the garbage, oh, I had no idea. Like, that matters to you. Okay. But I'll take out the garbage. Like, what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's understanding those things, which translates to parenting too. But I found that really
Yeah. And
helpful.
I would almost say that it's not even the act of taking out the garbage. It's like the larger picture is you like a really clean house that doesn't smell bad.
Right.
And that might not
Good
be a
point.
value point, to them. So the act of taking out the garbage is like, he's like, what? I don't even know that like that was a thing. And
Right.
it's not that little act, it's the larger picture. So it's like, okay, this supports that larger picture. And then it fits into the larger worldview because you're like, oh, I also don't want the house to stink. And I
Right.
also don't want,
Yeah.
want trash to be everywhere. But I
Right.
don't value taking out the garbage, but I do value the bigger picture. And you see this as a step to getting there.
For
I can
sure.
see where that fits in my worldview.
See,
And
you translated that perfectly because it's like what maybe someone would say, and then the other person's like,
mhm,
I don't, that's a value of yours. Like, I'm
totally.
my head's spinning.
Totally. And
Yeah.
and and well, we actually had to come to terms, my wife and I, that there are certain values that are different that
Hmm.
we won't come to the same agreement on. Then that just means that for us, if you value something more than someone else does,
Hmm.
then you have to put more effort into that thing and not expect them to put the same amount of effort. They'll try, but it's
Hmm.
never going to be what you want. And house cleanliness is a very interesting one to bring up because I grew up in a relatively messy house and I
Hmm.
don't see messes. Like they don't register in my head as something that's alarming. Like
Right.
so I don't naturally want to putter around and tidy and fix and blah blah. And my wife, her mom, that's like the essence of who she is like walking around, and she made everyone feel loved by how tidy everything really was.
Hmm.
And the reality is, I'm never going to value that. Like, I'm never going to like appreciate a tidy house over 99% of other things.
Right.
So I will do my best within my realm to
Hmm.
not make the house more messy. But if,
Right.
if you want it to be extra tidy, that's on your shoulders. Like
Right.
I'll help to what I can, but like, you got to understand that that doesn't fit in my realm of something that's actually important to me. And even when we walk that back to the end state, it's like, you can't show me a negative outcome to that. That's truly impactful in a way that I'm like, like that's important. And
Right.
and so I think that, and I'm not saying that you should just be be who you are and blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying like there are give and takes within that of like, I think if you want to flip it on its head, for me, like I value intimacy and sex in a higher way than my wife does. And the reality there is I have to take it more on my plate to make myself more desirable to her. It's and that's not her issue. That's because I have a higher value structure here and this is more important to me. I need to put more effort into this rather than assuming that she's going to meet me with the same effort that I'm on. Like, and that's a reality. You know, hers is housework, mine is sensuality, you know, like like there's places within the relationship that there is that give and take. But I also think like we're all so different that that might be the case for my relationship, but drastically different for other couples. And that's one of the things that I have a hard time with the social media world is like people so forcefully put out their direct opinion. This is how you do this. This is how you do this. And they're like, yeah, maybe for you, you know, like maybe for like 5% of people, but like you might just be different enough to where that actually is really detrimental to me. So I don't know. It's a very strange, big, interesting world. That's why I think conversations are important and fun.
They are. And I think you brought up a good point, how it's hard to see where it's easy to take something and think that you have to take exactly what someone says and kind of just lay it over something in your own life. And really it's all about just taking everyone's own personal experiences and it resonates with you, integrate a piece of it in. Like, you know, I've had to really figure that out with time and not go off of what I think things should look like based on what I hear, what I learn, and what looks like the ideal parent structure or relationship, and really get good at being like, okay, get back to the values, like what is actually important to me, and then work my way around those things and hone in my responsibilities and my ability to change and ebb and flow. And like you mentioned iPads, and I remember before I had my son, I was like, no screens, no this, no that. Like, how do people even do that? Why don't they just pay attention to their kids? And I wasn't as judgmental as that sounds, but in my head, I was like, why can't they just hang out? And then I had him. And then when his dad passed away, I was like, we were in survival mode. I'm like, who has an iPad? I'm like, someone give him an iPad so I can have a conversation over here. Or I'm going to dinner and I haven't been out of the house in, you know, months. Here you go. Like, this is so I can talk. And for my personal sanity as a parent, that I can just have a moment or 30 minutes with somebody. And so I can be a better parent when we leave here. So, but again, it ebbs and flows.
But that sounds like a conscious tool for me, right? That was intentional, and you're using it as a way to find space. Whereas I don't think it's as conscious for most people. And even what you're saying there, like, hey, we're in survival mode. I'm in an extreme scenario. My husband died, or the father of my son died. I need to survive, and I need to create this space. I'm going to use this tool in order to do so, which can very easily turn into this is just how we live, which is where I find the danger in anything like that. It's like the same thing as like, well, I'm just gonna have a drink to mellow out, you know, like and then you're like, well, now I'm an alcoholic. And I don't think it's like that step. It's just like we use these things, especially when they're intentionally stimulating or numbing or depressing. I just think the constant re-examination of that process of like, is this hitting the like that zoom out on the bigger picture? Is this doing what I want it to? Zoom back in, zoom out, bigger picture, and then like, but to me it sounds like you use it as a very intentional tool. And that's the same with us, you know. It's like play their video games on the weekend, you know. Saturday they get their morning cartoons, which is like they get to play Zelda and Link, and they love the heck out of it. And, yeah, you know. And then what was that?
I was saying, I know all about Zelda. Like I've learned about video games more than I thought I would ever know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so they'll play their morning on Saturday, and sometimes they'll ask for it on Sunday. And then, you know, occasionally throughout the week we'll do a random movie night. But it's like for us, we have two parents there and it's different, but like we're gonna deal with the uncomfortable situation of going out and having 4 children at the dinner table and them not getting anything, because for us that's more important in the long run, that they don't associate eating and technology. And because we have that balance, like I can pick up the baby and walk away, and Taz can be there and chatting with her family or whatever it is. Those are the hurdles we choose. And then that means like when we go on a flight and it's like a 15-hour flight, we throw on the TV for 15 hours. But we know the ramification is when they get off the plane, they're going to be little assholes for like 2 hours because they're like, their brain's coming off this like constant simulation that they don't get in their normal lives. But
sure.
the intentionality around it, I think, is something that I would love to see more parents do, and really examining the outcome of like, is this the best long-term solution that I want? And there's no right answer to that. And some kids need different types of things, but I see I am still judgmental, and I'm not against being judgmental. I know some people are, and it's like, oh, you should just reserve your judgment. But like I'm judgmental, but like you get to do what you want. Like that's the
Hmm.
nature of existence. I'm not going to make you do anything differently, but I
Hmm.
sure wish you would examine what you're currently doing.
Hmm.
And I just won't associate with you if we're drastically different on a fundamental level,
Right. Right.
like,
Same thing with the
and
relationship, right? The values. If they're
it's
too
it's the
far,
values.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like, well, what's sad for me though sometimes is like I see people who don't. It's the same thing with food. A lot of people don't understand how food works,
Hmm.
and they make all these very emotionally based decisions on what's right and what's wrong, and then they put shame into it and they do all these other things. But there's like that's not the truth of it. Like there's some general mechanisms, and then there's a larger picture of like psychology around it. Like that you have to take into account, but it's totally different from person to person. So to blanket statement anything in the food and the world is like ridiculous. But you see people come out, and I hate my industry for it, just saying this is how it is, and it's like that's not how it is. It's not how it
Yeah.
is for everyone. Even
Right.
if even if you think that's how it is, fuck you. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't mean
Yeah.
to
No,
like
exactly. I want to make sure
go
we
for it.
finish our conversation on the challenge. I want to
Let's
get
do
to
it.
the end of that, but let me just grab my computer charger real quick. There we go. I saw all of a sudden we were
There we
talking and
go.
I looked and it said 4%. And I was like, of course, first your internet gets connected, then I disconnect us with my
All the challenges. That's how we're gonna do it.
we're gonna just fly in by the seat of our pants, but we're gonna get this done. Okay, so we went down a lovely different channels of things that I'm so glad we did. That's how it normally works. And to get back to the challenge, I thought, where would I implement something like this? Because I don't necessarily yell, but I do get trying to think what my thing is, and I do get like I need a moment. So like I'll try and not distract him, but get him to do things instead of giving my full attention at the moment. So I was
Mhm.
kind of thinking like, how do I, which anyone could do, even if it's not yelling, it could be something else, and integrating this because I think it's such a good intent, like the intention behind what you're doing is so cool. So to the part where you started to share this on social media and say that you were doing this and kind of how you decided to make something. I know you mentioned the $5, right?
Yeah, so for me it was I made a challenge 1 month. I'm gonna pay my kid $5 right in that moment when I yell, if I yell. And the idea was that it'll give me some extra headspace, another thing to think about if I'm gonna yell.
Mm-hmm.
That's giving me a moment to think, is this the right tool? Because I find there is yelling I do intentionally, like, hey, they're running in the street, they got to go higher, it's got to go higher, boom, it hits.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's yelling that's responsive. That's like, hey, don't knock over that cup. It's right by your elbow. Move it. Huh? And they knock it over. And you go, what the hell?
Uh-huh.
Like, and it immediately goes to a yell. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, is that necessary there? The answer is no. Like that type of like straight up. I think there's no an accident is an accident by the name, and a
Right.
mistake is a mistake. It's like it just happens.
Mm-hmm.
The response, an acute like raising of the voice in an aggressive way, is not effective at doing anything other than highlighting the scenario as something big, and you can have a more learned outcome without that. So I had to remove that step of like go straight to yell, because I'm not by design a yeller. I don't communicate via yelling, and I've said that in some of my posts. But I think a lot of the people, when they saw the challenge, they're like, there are people who just that's how they parent. That's all they do. They
Right.
just yell at their kids. It's just
Mm-hmm.
constant. It's just like get this and do this and blah. And it's like that's not at all how I am. Like I'm
Right.
more emotional than my wife. I like very loving. I homeschool my kids. I work from home. Like
That's
I'm around
awesome.
them all the time. Like there's no, so that's not my go-to. So I think
Right.
whenever anyone saw this, it was kind of they were seeing it from their perspective, which
Mm-hmm.
is great. That's how you're gonna have to see it. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, it was just like these acute moments where I went to yelling when I didn't think I should. I wanted to put that barrier in there. So I put the $5 in, and I made it so I had to pay him right in the moment. I yell, I give you the money. And the very first 10 minutes, my second son made me yell. He didn't make me yell. I yelled, but he
Yeah.
he did something that caused
Mm-hmm.
me to respond via yelling.
Mhm.
And it was painful enough in a sense of like the stimulation of I yelled, then I go, damn it. And I like pull out the $5 and then give him the $5 and he
Mhm.
laughs at me and runs away. Like
Mhm.
was enough to be like, my brain was like, okay, I'm going to do a little highlighter there. Like when you do that,
Sure.
this other thing outcome happens as a result of
Mhm.
it. And that gave me plenty of space to the point where it's 31 days now. I think I'm in. I started on the 17th of last month.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it was 32 days, 33 days. I only yelled 4 times across that entire period, and it was all at the same kid. It was all at my second son, which data wise is very interesting to me, just to look at where that was, because I didn't even feel the urge with the other two kids. Like
Yeah.
those, all the scenarios that they could have been in, it was really easy to just be like, this isn't. I don't need to yell here. But there's been times where I've had to like hold it back with this single child, and then 4 times where the last time was a very conscious like, hey, I'm going to pay $5 so that I can do this. The reality is I think I'm going to continue on the challenge. Like I think it's going to be great. Like not even a challenge. I would just forever, if I yell at my kids, I give them $5. That way
Mhm.
I know that it's important. If it's important enough for me to yell at them in
Mhm.
a way like that, it's still going to cost me $5,
Mhm.
but I will find times where I think that's important enough.
Right.
Like, and that's still up for negotiation with my wife, like whether or not it is the appropriate response. And we're
Mhm.
having these conversations, and she still thinks that like even in those scenarios, there's probably a better way to handle it. But
Mhm.
he's like the kid that I'm talking about is he's like one of those kids where it's like, hey, stop doing that, but I'm doing it because of this, but I said stop doing that, but I'm doing it because of this, I said stop doing that, but it's because of this. And I'm like, I know it's because of that, it doesn't matter to me, I need you to stop. Like, and there's a time and place where I'm going to hear you out. Now it's not the time and place. And so we've recently kind of with him, we have to have a little bit more structure for him. But then I also have to recognize he's the kid who needs to have the ball thrown around with him for 2 hours. He's like, getting a dog that's the hyper one that you need to
Mhm.
run, and you're wondering why he's acting out and tipping over the trash can. And it's like, he needs to be run for 5 hours. Like
Mhm.
you got a Vishla and you put him in your house. Like, what do you expect? Like,
Yeah.
and so recognizing my own responsibility there. But all in all, I'm 32 days in. I'm just going to keep it going forever. I think I learned a lot on it, and I think it's a better way of going about things. And I've had hundreds of fathers reach out to me, like
Really?
hundreds, who are just like hundreds of direct messages that are just being like, I can't believe the relationship I have with my kids now. This is amazing. And I didn't even do anything. And like, because the thing for
Right.
me is like, dude, you did it. Like you
Yeah.
did that. Like the fact that all it took for you was a simple post being like, hey, maybe think about what you're doing. And they
Mhm.
did it. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Like
Yeah.
that's amazing. Like, because
Mhm.
so much of social media is just performative in the sense that it's like, yeah, I'm gonna
Mhm.
agree with your ideology here and blah 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 and like move
Mhm.
on. And the fact that it had an impact on even one father, let alone hundreds who have messaged me and been like, whoa, and mothers too, who are like,
Mhm.
I'm trying this. I'm out $40, but it's very intentional when I do it now, and like just
Yeah.
bringing some level of intentionality to it. That was
Yeah.
like, that means something to me, because I really think there's a sense of actually taking action
Mhm.
and then just saying something or just watching something or double tapping and liking something, and or even just talking about something. Like, yeah, therapy is great and talking about something, but you got to take action afterwards. Like, you can't just
Sure.
be the one who has all the words and does the shit and like, yeah, I went to there and I'm working on self. It's like, you can say that shit, but you got to do it. Like,
Right.
you got to do it. You actually
Mhm.
have to take the steps, and that's what's uncomfortable. I think
Mhm.
initially talking about it is uncomfortable, but the real uncomfortable thing is doing the thing. And the fact that people are doing it, I'm stoked on. And we're good. I'm good.
That's
Things happened.
Well, that's so cool to think like back in the beginning when you were saying you have this interesting relationship with social media and what's out there. And here you decided to change that perspective and put stuff out there that you were really proud of and just share, like you said, it's kind of like this life journal kind of thing. And to look that and see that actually what you're putting out there is making such a big impact and allowing people to again take it and implement it how they saw fit. You gave them that kind of, because sometimes we just kind of need that nudge or like that, like, yeah, I want to be better, but I really don't know what makes me better. And you
Yeah.
had this thought to be creative and think like, this works for me. Here you go. And it was something that was so attainable and digestible for other people and and funny, right? It takes something that's kind of can be heavy, right? If someone feels like
Yeah.
this is a problem and they feel like they don't know how to get out of this cycle, it can feel heavy and it can feel, I think people
Yeah.
can tend to be hard on themselves. And you kind of took something that's intentional and also made it playful, which helps everybody, right? It helps the kids that are dealing with it too. It's right. Hey, I'm not perfect. I'm working on this. And what a cool message for kids to see too, that, your parents aren't perfect. And when they're they're not,
Yeah.
they figure out how to ebb and flow with that. So that in itself, I think, is an amazing message that not a lot of kids get to see that side of their parents and realize that we're very human too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm glad I can share that with my kids. I mean, my parents did a good job of sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, just being human. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I don't know. I don't understand the hiding of things. Like, it to
Yeah.
me, it's just lying. It's
Yeah.
like you're setting your people up for failure. You're setting yourself up for failure if you're pretending you be a certain way and then you're not.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it seems like a constant subtle lie that just erodes the foundation of who you are. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
I
just
know.
my thought on it.
No, I think that's, and it also, I've found, and I have related it to other things when we let them see this, and using kids and parenting as an example, as kind of the real life stuff. So when it happens to them, they don't think they're broken and that this is just
Yeah,
part of life. And I think that
yeah,
is something I had to learn later on in life, kind of on my own journey, and be like, oh, like when you mess up, as long as you take something from it and you start, you put it in your toolbox, that doesn't mean you're broken. Just like when people, I forget the reason on why I think it was back when I got really sick with COVID a couple years ago. And so many of us think that when something happens, that it's kind of a scary thing and that we're broken, and then really like, you know what, this happens, you get through it, you come out the other side, and that's okay. And it's the more like, I don't know how to really describe it, the more authentic, I guess, and real we are, the less shit actually feels so detrimental. It's like, okay, here we go.
yeah.
Like, just look at it, face it head on, and then you just go right through it, which I find tends to be the easiest. When I use that word lightly, but the most comfortable way and complete way through something is just like meet it head on. There you go.
Yeah. And what I find really interesting about that is like how those things all happen and how those journeys go are very different from
Mm-hmm.
person to person. Like you, for instance, had to realize that you're okay when things happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so late as life goes on, you go, oh, this doesn't mean I'm a bad person. This doesn't mean I'm a failure.
Right.
Whereas for me, rather than learning that I'm okay when things happen, I had an overinflated sense of self and competence.
Mm-hmm.
I had to realize that a lot of the reasons that things happen were my fault.
Mm-hmm.
So like I that I wasn't okay. Like I
Yeah.
needed to be different. I needed to
Yeah.
be these things. And the work was on my end,
Mm-hmm.
whereas I think someone who is tends to put stuff on themselves
Mm-hmm.
will always be like, oh, something's wrong with me, like I'm broken, I'm blah blah blah. I had to
Right.
be like, well, I need to be different, like so
Mm-hmm.
that journey was similar, but from other ends of the spectrum,
Uh-huh.
just based off of our own histories, and
Yeah.
and it's definitely an interesting game to watch play out from within self as well as watching other people go through it and
That
hear people
is
talk about it.
That's so true. And that's a good point. And it's all like we kind of end up wanting, in a very broad way, wanting the same things, the same balance, the
Hmm.
same understanding. But we come from like we all get there different in different ways. Like to your point from
Totally.
earlier, everyone's journey is different, but a lot of us have the same idea. Like we want that balance. We
Yeah.
want that. There's a piece that I'm responsible and this and that, and that. And then also I'm not broken if this happens. And you're like, well, actually, there's some things I could change. Like that could be,
Right.
So I think
Yeah.
that's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
That's
I think
really
it's really
cool.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
But recognizing where we're coming from, I think, is the hard part. Is like
Yeah.
recognizing what our steps are there,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's being stronger or whether it's being
Mm-hmm.
softer. Like is the two sides of it that I'm like, oh, do I need to soften up and be more malleable, or do I need to
Yeah.
harden up and be more rigid
Mm-hmm.
and stand up for myself and do these other
Mm-hmm.
things? So
Yeah.
that's always been an interesting balance.
Well, with a little bit of time that we have left, if you do you have a little bit of time left?
I do, yeah,
Okay. Something I wanted to touch on. You've shared a handful of different stories about things that there was like a volleyball story, a man and his
yeah,
son playing volleyball, and how that
yeah,
interaction went. And you ended up saying something to him after the fact. But there was another one that you had mentioned. And I think it was about like man's highest calling is sometimes just to stand and hug. I think
and
that
hug,
was, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And so when I heard that story that that personal story you had shared, witnessed, and then that quote, my question, or what I would love to get your perspective on, is as a father, we'll use that as an example, but even a man in a relationship and kind of
Mm.
this role of just to stand and hug and not feel like you're not performing your role as like fatherly duties that a lot of people have instilled, that you have to be the authoritarian, you have to be the one that, maybe is less emotional. And these are old beliefs beliefs, but I think a lot of people are still working through those and
Yeah,
still showing up as you and not having to be something extreme on one end or the other, but notice that
totally.
balance of just showing up and kind of just being there. And that actually is teaching little people something too.
For sure. Unfortunately, I think it's a different journey for everyone, but kind of similar to what I said earlier is I think it goes back to being more outcome based.
Mm-hmm.
So take, for instance, needing to fix everything, right?
Right.
If the goal is to fix the problem in the moment, then that thought process is a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you tell me something, I need to fix it. Whereas maybe the goal is not to fix that thing in the moment. The
Mm-hmm.
goal is a deeper connection with the person you're talking to, which then means, no, I don't need to fix the thing in the moment. I just need to listen to you and stand and hug. So
Mm-hmm.
when the goal is larger and you're looking at the same larger goal, it makes the individual action in the moment make a lot more sense. And I find a lot of masculine energy tends to be very linear and logical.
Yeah.
And which is ironic because not ironic, but in my relationship, I probably carry more of the feminine energy when it comes to emotions. My wife has had to learn to be more emotional. She's very rational and logical. And then some of my stuff was like, ah, and like it's bigger on the emotional swings, but I still do represent like 99% of the masculine in our relationship. We're very traditional in our roles and all these other things. But as a process of recognizing who we were and looking at the outcome, like what makes the most sense for our family and for our outcome.
Right.
And so I think that really helps, like with any given situation, is if you want to be doing the right thing, you need to look at the larger picture. What is the outcome that I want? Is this doing this? I urge everyone to examine that. The people in my comments who are like, I want to yell at my kids so I can create boundaries and so I can create strength and blah, blah, blah. Then I'm like, that's okay. I hear you. How do you figure that how do you think that mechanism works? How do you think the mechanism of yelling then creates strength? Like what is that? What is the link between those two? Like, because I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the, like, I yell at them, they become stronger and more resilient, especially in a developing mind. That, like, the science doesn't back that. The, like, even the anecdotal evidence from everybody, like, you take one read through the comments and look at all these broken people who directly attribute yelling to that, and it might not be as linear as they're making it out to be. I'm sure they had other things going on, but it's still like, I don't think that person's looking at the bigger picture. I think they're going based off of the rhetoric they hear or their own personal perspective on what they've experienced. Hey, I did this and I'm fine. And it's like, you're not fine. You're clearly not fine. But like you're commenting on some random dude's internet forum telling him he's going to go to hell. Like you're not fine. You know, like I've never felt the need to do that in my entire life. That lash out alone should tell you that you're not fine. But I think examining the larger picture, and I think that goes to, again, talking about if you're going not too soft, but like going on the other side of things, being like, it's all about care. It's all about compassion. I'm always going to show love. I'm always like, whatever my kid does, it is the right thing. And I'm like, no, it's fucking not. Like, they're kids. It's not the right thing. It's not always the right thing. You are by design the parent, and you have to model for them and show them that there are directions that are not acceptable in the larger social space. You know, like I think in both those scenarios, looking at the bigger picture and being like, what are we trying for here? Do I want a strong, resilient, compassionate, caring, loving child? Okay, is this action the most effective, or is it just kind of effective? Is it helping now, or is it helping in the long run? And I think that always going back to those can get you out of your, this was done to me, so I can do it to someone else.
Right. Exactly. You think that you're okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's amazing. And I think that touches on, it's kind of like a full circle moment, because I think that's kind of been our intention for what we've been talking about, and how people can take bits and pieces and what's the real thing we're all looking for. Because when you drill it down to that, it's much clearer to be able to sift through the shit and figure out what actually is useful for you and what you really want. Because sometimes half the time I feel like there are moments I'm like, do I really know what I want? I need to sit and think about this, because I haven't even checked in to be like, what is the outcome I want? I'm just reacting. I'm not, or I'm surviving. That's kind of my mechanism. I don't necessarily react, but I'm in survival. Like, what lets me survive for the next moment to get to the next one?
Totally. That's all the time. My wife and I do it all the time. Hey, Dad, can I have some cheese? No, we just ate. Wait, why do I care if he has cheese or not?
Right.
Yeah, man, you can have some cheese. You know, like, it's like,
totally. That's
like,
exactly.
it's the exact scenario of like, who cares if
Why
he
do I
has
care?
some cheese? Yeah, you can have
Right.
some cheese. Go for it.
Right.
Like, but
Totally.
the initial response is like, you pushing my buttons. Like
Yes.
it's a
Yes.
I say this all the time, but I think about people who don't have the luxuries that I have. If you look at
Mhm.
like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and they don't have a safe place to eat and sleep, and they don't know that food's coming, they don't know what work's doing, their
Mhm.
entire life's stressful, they don't have a good relationship, they've never had a good example.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh yeah, be more conscious and present. And it's like, no, man, you need to survive.
Yeah.
And survival first is a very, very real thing. And I'm aware of that, and I am very saddened by that.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know. I don't have the answers for that.
But I
So
think if they
I
come
think
across what you share, that in itself is like this. Oh, there are options. There are these little glimmers, and to the point of they can
yeah,
take bits and pieces. And even if just for a moment, it helps them see
yeah,
that they're human too, and how they're operating is exactly perfect for that moment until they get a new tool that gives them another way to operate, then
yeah.
that is what it is. So I think even indirectly, there's probably a lot that you have to share and are doing for people that even that have different circumstances. But I think that's
I'm
really
trying.
cool. Well, it's working out. Presence. I feel like that's something I'm always talking about. Yeah, you're here, but presence is very different than physically sitting here. But is there something that you find that helps you as a human, as a father, as a parent, find helps kind of check yourself? Or do you have anything that you found in those moments when there's a million things going on and they just want your time? What's the balance of I want to be present for you, but also I have things I need to do too. And there needs to be this like level of you're important. I see you and I'll be with you in just 1 second. And the difference between
Yeah,
you have my undivided attention right now because you need it. And it might be case by case. I find it's very case by case intuitive basis. And
yeah,
you know when it's meant to have that undivided and not, but maybe it's not. But if you
yeah.
have any like little tidbit.
I could say like an overarching thing is that I am not able to be as present when I don't sleep enough. So like there's just a compounding degradation of my ability to be present
Mm-hmm.
when I'm not sleeping well.
Mm-hmm.
And which is ironic because a lot of parenting and parenthood is not sleeping for 11 years. But when you
Yeah.
can prioritize that, it's kind of like the first building block of everything else lining up a bit better to be
Uh-huh.
more present. It's like, if we're looking at that hierarchy of needs, like I spoke about earlier, if we look at like an emotional hierarchy there, where for me in my own experience, like, because I think training is really important. I think filling your cup with things that fill your cup in life, really
Mm-hmm.
important. I think eating well is really important. In terms of order of importance, I've found that I am able to be more present if I'm sleeping well. And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean like these guys who are like, I go to bed with my red light on and then I wake up and then I do the da 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 and I jump in my ice bath and a blah blah blah. It's like, dude, you don't have
Yeah.
kids
Yeah.
and you're a social media influencer, so F right off.
Yeah,
But like
exactly.
literally just being like, I'm gonna go to bed at 10 tonight and I'm gonna try to sleep until 7 and whatever happens and do that for a few nights in a row.
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more likely to be present in my day-to-day life just because I'm not working from a deficit. So
Mm-hmm.
that is an overarching thing. If we had
Yeah.
to not pick instances, it's that. And then staying away from this
Mm-hmm. The
as
phone.
much as possible. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
most addictive thing in the world.
For
And then
sure.
doing a bunch of this are the
Journaling.
three things.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, like those three things. If you want to be more present, sleep, lock the phone in a closet,
Uh-huh.
journal,
Journal. There
like
you
you'll
go.
find yourself being more present more often. And that was my experience.
That's amazing. And I think overall, it sounds like knowing thyself, you have really gotten to a point where you can kind of tap into those things that and get really clear on what those are. So it's been a
Thank you.
pleasure letting me pick your brain and figuring out how I'm going to implement the $5. My son will probably love that. Because what I found was funny is when you explained all of your kids, he's like a combo of all of your kids, which is funny because you were
Ah,
talking about what each of them need when you realize
yeah,
parenting wise that some of them need more of
yeah,
like the physical touch, some of them need more of like the verbal, some of them
yeah.
just do it like, and I'm like, oh, he's like a combo of all of them. So whatever you do for each one of them, I'm just going to implement to the one.
Well, we'll see what this fourth one is too. Maybe he's that other side of the kids that
That's true.
it's your fourth side of your son.
There you
It'll be
go.
fun.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Okay, just because this episode's over, it doesn't mean our time together has to be. Check the show notes on ways for us to stay connected. And one more thing, if you found this episode helpful, I would be so excited if you chose to rate it, review it, like it, share it, or shout it from the rooftops to those you think might align with it. The more soul-aligned we are, the more beautiful, harmonious, and fulfilling this world becomes. We're in this wild ride of life
together. Okay, that's all. I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you've been listening to Wild Voice.